Mila Caruso believed control was a form of safety. Every morning began the same way. The kettle at precisely 6. The violin case opened at 6:15. Long, deliberate strokes across the strings before the city fully woke. Before noise, before chaos, before the world had a chance to intrude. She lived above a bakery that smelled like warm bread and routine. A place where nothing unexpected happened. Where the walls were thin but familiar. Where her life followed clean lines she could predict and correct if needed. Discipline was her armor. Precision was her refuge. At 23, Mila had never been touched. Not in the way people whispered about, not in the way that complicated lives and broke focus. Desire, she believed, was distraction. Attachment was a weakness. And love could wait. She told herself that being untouched meant being unbroken. That as long as she stayed careful enough, quiet enough, exact enough, the world wouldn't reach her. Then her phone rang after midnight. Not a message, not a missed call, but a sharp vibration that cut through the stillness like a blade. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, flat, efficient, merciless. Her cousin had vanished. A private card room, a debt that grew faster than time, penalties stacked like interest on a life already borrowed. And then a name, spoken slowly, deliberately, as if it carried its own consequences. Rafael Moretti. The name landed heavy in her chest. Mila had heard it before. Everyone had. A man who did not exist in daylight conversations. A man whose power wasn't measured in headlines, but in silence. In disappearances, in doors that never reopened. Rafael Moretti was not someone you pleaded with. But Mila did not have the luxury of fear. By morning, her violin case remained closed. The routine shattered. The bakery smell felt distant. Safety evaporated. She dressed plainly, no makeup, no jewelry. Nothing that could be mistaken for confidence. And still, when she stood outside the building where Rafael Moretti conducted his business, glass and steel rising like a warning, she felt painfully exposed. This was not a place for innocence. Inside, the air was quiet in a way that demanded obedience. Men watched her without curiosity, only assessment. She was escorted upward, each floor carrying her further from the life she understood. And then she stood before him. Rafael Moretti did not look like chaos. He was still, controlled, impossibly calm. A man carved from restraint rather than rage. His presence bent the room, not through force, but certainty. Mila offered everything she had. Work, service, humiliation, time. She would clean floors, copy files, disappear into the background of his world if that was what it took. She did not ask for mercy. She asked for time. Rafael listened without interruption. He did not raise his voice. He did not smile. He studied her posture, her breathing, the way she stood straight even as fear threatened to fold her inward. He declined the obvious punishments, declined the years of servitude, declined the debts paid in blood. Instead, he stood and stepped closer, close enough that Mila could feel the shift in the air, the weight of his attention settling on her like gravity. And then he offered something far more dangerous than refusal. Appear with him, live under his protection, learn his rules. Nothing forced, nothing fast. We'll start slow. The words were quiet, measured, almost gentle. And yet Mila felt her pulse stumble, not from desire, but from the instinctive understanding that this was not mercy. This was a threshold. Because some doors don't close once you step through them. Some choices change the shape of your life forever. Mila did not know it yet, but by accepting his offer, she wasn't just entering Rafael Moretti's world. She was becoming visible in it. And in a city built on shadows, visibility was the most dangerous thing of all. Stories like this take countless hours to write, edit, and record. So if you enjoy them, please consider subscribing. Mila Caruso signed nothing. There was no contract, no paper trail. No safety net disguised as legality. Rafael Moretti did not need signatures. His word carried weight because it was final. By nightfall, Mila was no longer a visitor. She was escorted from the building not back into the street, but into a waiting car with blacked-out windows and a driver who did not speak. The city passed by in fractured reflections. Neon lights cutting across glass like warning signs she could not read fast enough. This was how people disappeared, she realized. Not violently, not loudly, but quietly, between destinations. The penthouse sat above the city like a watchtower. Clean lines, cold light, silence so complete it pressed against her ears. Everything about the space was intentional. Nothing personal, nothing soft. This was not a home. It was a position. Raphael did not crowd her. He moved with controlled distance, explaining rules the way one explained gravity, unchangeable, unquestioned. She would be visible, always composed, never alone in public. She would speak when spoken to. She would never be touched without permission, hers. The last rule unsettled her the most, because it suggested restraint where she expected entitlement. Mila was given a room that felt like a hotel suite, stripped of warmth. Neutral colors, no clutter, no reminders of life before. Her suitcase arrived an hour later, already unpacked by unseen hands. Control, she realized, could be elegant. That night, she did not sleep. The city glowed beneath the windows, alive, dangerous, indifferent. Somewhere below, her cousin's life remained balanced on the edge of a debt that ticked like a clock. And somewhere in the same space, Raphael Moretti watched the city the way generals once studied battlefields. He did not enter her room. He did not summon her. He waited. Morning arrived without ceremony. Raphael's world moved early. Meetings came and went with the efficiency of machinery. Mila observed from the edges, silent, attentive, absorbing the unspoken rules of power exchanges disguised as polite conversation. Men deferred without being told. Voices lowered when Raphael entered. Threats were delivered through smiles. At noon, she was dressed, not extravagantly, but deliberately. A tailored dress, clean lines, nothing suggestive, nothing accidental. Visibility, Raphael had said, not decoration. Their first public appearance was a charity luncheon overlooking the river, money laundering hidden behind philanthropy and champagne. Mila understood quickly that her role was not ornamental, it was symbolic. Raphael Moretti did not bring women he did not intend to protect. Eyes followed them as they entered. Curiosity sharpened into calculation. Who was she? Why now? Was she leverage or liability? Mila felt it. Attention pressing against her skin like heat. She kept her posture steady, her expression composed, her breath even. Control, she reminded herself. At the table, a man laughed too loudly, let his gaze linger too long. A test. Raphael did not correct him verbally. He simply placed his hand over Mila's, brief, deliberate, possessive without pressure. The message traveled faster than words ever could. The man paled, apologized, looked away. Mila's pulse raced, not from the touch, but from what it represented. Protection could be terrifying. Later, alone again, she confronted Raphael with the only question she could safely ask. Why her? Raphael answered without sentiment. Because innocence is disarming. Because untouched calm unsettles men who trade in chaos. Because enemies miscalculate what they don't understand. And because proximity creates obedience. The truth settled heavy in her chest. She was not a prize. She was a message. That evening, Raphael outlined the structure of her debt reduction. Stages, appearances, lessons. Though he did not define them yet. Mila noticed something then. He never stepped closer unless she did first. Never raised his voice. Never assumed compliance. Power in his hands was not loud. It was patient. And patience, she was beginning to learn, could be more dangerous than violence. Because patience waited. And waiting meant anticipation. And anticipation, unchecked, changed people. As Mila stood alone again at the window, city lights flickering like distant warnings, one truth became unavoidable. She had not escaped danger. She had entered a quieter, more deliberate version of it. And Raphael Moretti was watching, not to claim her, not yet, but to see how long her control would last once she realized she was no longer invisible. Mila Caruso learned quickly that Raphael Moretti did nothing impulsively. Every decision was layered. Every offer carried weight beneath its surface. The proposal he had made, the one that echoed in her thoughts long after he spoke it, was not revisited immediately. Raphael let silence do its work. He let uncertainty sharpen her awareness, let the absence of clarity become its own pressure. Control, she was beginning to understand, was most effective when it felt voluntary. They sat across from one another in his private office as the city darkened outside the windows. No guards, no interruptions, just space. Deliberately measured, Raphael spoke at last, not as a man making demands, but as one setting conditions. Her cousin's debt would be divided into stages. Each stage could be reduced, not erased, through time spent publicly at his side. Appearances, dinners, events where alliances were tested and eyes kept score. No intimacy was required, not now. What was required was consent. Explicit, ongoing, revocable. At any point she could stop. At any point the arrangement would end. The words should have comforted her. Instead, they unsettled her deeply. Because Raphael Moretti did not need to give her an exit. Yet he was building one into the structure. Mila asked the question she had been avoiding since the beginning. What happens when people assume she belongs to him? Raphael did not deny it. They would assume exactly that. Visibility came with consequence. Proximity created narrative. And narrative, in his world, was power. She would be watched, tested, interpreted as leverage. But she would also be protected, absolutely. No one touched what belonged to Raphael Moretti without answering for it. The implication hung between them, heavy and unspoken. Mila realized then that this arrangement was not about possession. It was about presence. She would stand beside him, be seen, be discussed, be weighed. And in exchange she would be untouchable. The first lesson, he explained, would not involve contact. It would involve closeness, standing within his space, sharing silence, allowing herself to be observed without retreating into precision and distance. Mila's throat tightened. She had spent her life perfecting distance. Now she was being asked to surrender it, slowly, deliberately, by choice. That night, the lesson began. No music, no conversation. Just the two of them standing near the windows. The city alive below. Raphael did not move closer. He simply waited. Mila felt every inch between them like a living thing. Her awareness sharpened, breath shallow, thoughts loud. She was not afraid of him. She was afraid of what the quiet was doing to her. Minutes stretched. Then, tentatively, she stepped closer. Not enough to touch, just enough to feel the shift. Raphael's attention sharpened instantly, but he did not react. No approval, no command, only acknowledgement. The lesson ended there, the debt reduced, numerically, precisely. And Mila was left alone with the realization that she had crossed a line no one had forced her over. Over the next days, the structure solidified. Each lesson had a boundary. Each boundary had a cost. Each cost had a number attached to it. And always, Raphael repeated the same words. You can stop. The city began to whisper. People noticed her presence, asked questions without asking them, watched Raphael Moretti more closely than before. Enemies grew curious. Curiosity in his world was never harmless. Mila began to sense it. The tightening air, the subtle shifts in tone, the way conversations paused when she entered rooms. She was no longer an unknown variable. She was a visible one. And yet, something inside her was changing too. The calm she had built her life around no longer felt like armor. It felt like a wall. And walls, she was learning, kept out more than danger. As Raphael walked her to her door that night, he stopped just short of the threshold. He did not follow her inside. He did not touch her. He simply said one thing, quiet, deliberate, unwavering. This only works if you want it. Mila closed the door behind her with her heart racing, her control fraying at the edges. Because for the first time, the question was no longer whether she could endure his world. It was whether she wanted to keep stepping closer, knowing exactly how much it would cost her to keep her distance. By the end of the first week, Mila Caruso understood the unspoken rule of Raphael Moretti's world. Nothing mattered more than what people believed. The charity luncheons multiplied. Private dinners followed. Openings, galas, negotiations wrapped in crystal and courtesy. Mila appeared at Raphael's side each time. Composed, deliberate, unflinching. She learned how to walk half a step behind him in crowded rooms, how to stand close enough to imply intimacy without inviting it, how to hold a gaze just long enough to command respect. Publicly, Raphael was all authority. He spoke little, listened more, corrected men without raising his voice. And when he placed a hand at the small of Mila's back, never lingering, never claiming, rooms recalibrated around the gesture. It was not affection, it was declaration. Privately, the distance returned. In the car rides home, silence stretched without discomfort. Raphael never filled it unnecessarily. He allowed her space, physical and emotional, even as the world outside tried to collapse it. This contrast unsettled Mila more than cruelty ever could have, because control without force felt like choice, and choice demanded accountability. The second lesson came without ceremony, no explanation, no build-up. They stood in his private living space, city lights reflecting against glass, the hush of elevation pressing in. Raphael faced her, close enough now that she could see the faint scar along his jaw, the stillness in his eyes. "This is about trust," he said simply. He lifted his hand, but did not touch her. Mila had to decide whether to close the distance herself. Her heart pounded as she stepped forward, stopping inches away. Her breath brushed his collarbone. She felt the heat of him, contained, deliberate, waiting. Raphael did not move. He let her stand there. Let the moment stretch. Let anticipation do its work. Then he stepped back. The lesson ended. The debt dropped again. Mila retreated to her room that night unsettled in a way she could not name. No line had been crossed. And yet something inside her had shifted. She was no longer enduring the lessons. She was anticipating them. Danger made itself known soon after. At a private dinner hosted by one of Raphael's rivals, a man laughed too easily, touched Mila's wrist in greeting, too familiar, too bold. The room froze. Raphael's response was immediate, not violent, not loud. He simply met the man's gaze and said his name. Once, the hand vanished, the laughter died. Apologies poured out like sweat. Later, Raphael spoke to Mila alone. "Proximity invites challenge," he said. "They test what they want to break." She asked the question that had been forming in her chest. "And if they think I'm your weakness?" Raphael did not deny it. "Then they will miscalculate." The city adjusted. Whispers grew sharper, speculation spread. Some believed Mila was leverage. Others believed she was shielded. Both were dangerous assumptions. Mila began to feel it. The way her presence altered negotiations, how conversations angled differently, how threats softened or sharpened depending on where she stood. She was not ornamental. She was influential. And influence came with risk. The third lesson arrived on a night thick with tension. Raphael invited her to sit beside him, not across, not distant, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "This lesson is about stillness," he said. He remained motionless. Mila mirrored him. Minutes passed. Her breathing slowed. Her thoughts softened. She became acutely aware of every sensation, the warmth beside her, the controlled restraint in his posture, the certainty that if she moved even slightly, the moment would change. When she shifted, just barely, Raphael turned his head. Their eyes met. No touch, no words. The silence deepened. When he finally stood, the lesson ended. Mila realized she was trembling, not from fear, from recognition. Something about being seen, fully, deliberately, without demand, was unraveling her careful detachment. As she returned to her room, one truth followed her like an echo. She had entered this arrangement to save her cousin. She had stayed to survive. But now she was beginning to want. And wanting, in Raphael Moretti's world, was never without consequence. Mila Caruso began to notice the change before she understood it. Her mornings no longer returned to their old precision. The violin case remained open longer, her bow lingering over strings as if she were waiting for something to interrupt her rhythm. The bakery's familiar scent felt less grounding than it once had. Control, once her refuge, now felt incomplete. The lessons continued, structured, deliberate, unhurried. Raphael never announced them. They arrived naturally, woven into quiet moments and shared spaces, framed as extensions of trust rather than demands. The fourth lesson came late, after a night thick with negotiation and veiled threats. The city outside pulsed with restlessness, rain streaking down the glass like warnings no one could read. "This one involves contact," Raphael said, his voice calm, measured. Mila felt the words settle in her chest, not with fear but with awareness. "You can stop," he added, as he always did. She nodded once. Raphael removed his jacket with deliberate care, setting it aside. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms marked by faint scars, evidence of a life lived close to consequence. He lifted his hand, palm open, offering rather than taking. "Your choice," he said. Mila hesitated. This was the boundary she had defined herself by, untouched, unbroken. And yet, standing here, with him waiting, with no pressure in his posture, no impatience in his gaze, she realized something unsettling. She trusted him. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. The contact was brief, measured, intentional. Raphael did not tighten his grip, did not pull her closer. He simply closed his fingers around hers, warm, steady, present. The sensation traveled through her like electricity, not because it was overwhelming, but because it was restrained. He held her hand for 3 steady breaths. Then he released it. The lesson ended, the debt reduced. Mila stood alone afterward, her pulse racing, her fingers tingling with the absence of contact. Nothing dramatic had occurred, and yet everything had changed. Over the following days, the city reacted. People noticed how Raphael positioned himself near her, how he listened more intently when she spoke, how his attention shifted when she entered a room. Men watched her with curiosity edged with caution. Jealousy surfaced, not loud, not crude, but calculated. At a fundraiser hosted by a rival family, a woman laughed too brightly at Raphael's side, leaning in close, testing narrative as much as interest. Mila observed from a distance, her chest tightening in a way she did not recognize at first. Then she did. It was jealousy. The realization startled her. She had entered this world to survive. She had stayed to fulfill obligation. But now, emotion had entered the structure, and emotion disrupted control. That night, Raphael addressed it without accusation. "Attachment changes the equation," he said quietly as they stood overlooking the city. "For everyone involved." Mila met his gaze. "And if I don't want it to stop?" she asked. Raphael studied her carefully, not with triumph, but with caution. "Then the stakes increase," he said. The next lesson arrived sooner than expected. This time, Raphael stood behind her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his presence at her back. "Still your breath," he instructed softly. She did. "Lean back," he said. She hesitated, then did. Her back brushed his chest. Raphael did not move, did not hold her. He allowed the contact to exist without claiming it. Seconds passed, long enough for her body to register the connection, long enough for her to understand how powerful restraint could be. When she stepped away, Raphael nodded once. The lesson ended. Later, alone in her room, Mila confronted the truth she had been avoiding. She was no longer untouched, not in the way that mattered. And being unbroken, she was learning, did not mean remaining distant. Sometimes it meant choosing where, and with whom, you allowed yourself to be held, even briefly. Down below, the city continued its quiet war, and somewhere within it, enemies took note, because Raphael Moretti's composure had shifted. And Mila Caruso, once invisible, had become unmistakably, dangerously real. Mila Caruso learned the city listened long before it acted. Whispers did not announce themselves. They moved through rooms like currents, subtle, persistent, shaping outcomes before anyone acknowledged them. And now, those whispers carried her name. Raphael Moretti's world had noticed the change. He stood closer to her in public, not possessive, precise. His hand at her back lasted a second longer than before. His attention, once distributed across rooms and faces, now returned to her instinctively, like a compass recalibrating. Men noticed, and men tested what they noticed. The first warning came at a private gallery opening, a gathering too intimate to be truly public, too public to be truly safe. Mila moved through the space with practiced composure, greeting hosts, accepting compliments, performing her role with quiet control. A man she did not know approached her while Raphael was momentarily engaged elsewhere. He smiled too easily, commented on her dress, stepped closer than protocol allowed. Mila shifted back, polite but firm. The man laughed, dismissive. "Relax," he said. "I just wanted to see what all the attention was about." Before Mila could respond, Raphael's voice cut through the space. "Step away." 2 words, calm, controlled. The man froze. Raphael did not raise his voice. He did not touch the man. He simply stood between them, his presence altering the temperature of the room. The man apologized quickly, too quickly. Later that night, Mila learned the man would no longer be attending gatherings of that caliber. No explanation was offered. None was needed. Raphael addressed it afterward, not as reassurance, but as education. "This will happen more often," he said. "They will probe for weakness." Mila swallowed. "And what happens when they think I am it?" Raphael met her gaze, unwavering. "Then they will learn how expensive mistakes can be." The city tested him again days later. A rival family made a move, not against Raphael directly, but around him. A shipment delayed, a meeting interrupted, a message sent without words. Mila felt the shift before she understood it. Security tightened, routes changed. Raphael's attention sharpened, not frantic, not panicked, but focused. Danger did not look like chaos. It looked like preparation. One evening, as they returned from a dinner that had lasted too long and said too little, the car slowed unexpectedly. The driver did not speak. Raphael's hand came up instantly, palm open, signaling stillness. Mila's heart hammered. The pause lasted seconds. Then the car moved again. No explanation followed. Later, Raphael spoke only once. "They're watching," he said. That night, the lesson changed. There was no structure, no staged escalation. Raphael stood close, closer than before. "You don't have to continue," he said quietly. "This arrangement ends if you want it to." Mila looked up at him, her pulse loud in her ears. "And if I don't?" Raphael exhaled slowly. "Then I protect you." The words should have frightened her. Instead, they grounded her. Because protection, she was learning, was not about distance. It was about commitment. The next day, jealousy surfaced again, this time from someone who did not hide it. At a luncheon, a man openly questioned Mila's presence, suggested she was a distraction, a liability, a vulnerability Raphael could not afford. The room went quiet. Raphael responded not with anger, but with clarity. "She is where I place her," he said, "and she stays." The statement echoed through the space like a verdict. That night, alone, Mila finally acknowledged what she had been circling for days. She was no longer just participating in Raphael's world. She was changing it. And that made her dangerous, to his enemies and perhaps to him. As she stood at the window, city lights blurred beneath her gaze. Mila felt the weight of choice pressing down on her. Walking away would be safer. Staying would mean becoming something else. Something visible, something protected, something worth targeting. Behind her, the door opened softly. Raphael did not enter her space. He stopped at the threshold. "I won't lie to you," he said. "This ends badly for people who hesitate." Mila turned to face him. "And for people who stay?" Raphael held her gaze for a long moment. "For them," he said, "it ends differently." The city held its breath. And so did Mila Caruso. Because she understood now, this was no longer about debt. It was about what she was willing to risk being seen as, and whether she was prepared to stand beside a man whose protection came with consequences. No one survived unchanged. The debt still existed on paper, numbers remained, stages remained. The structure Raphael Moretti had built continued to function with mechanical precision. But for Mila Caruso, something fundamental had changed. She stopped counting, not deliberately, not defiantly. She simply realized one morning that the numbers no longer mattered. The lessons continued, but they no longer felt like transactions. They became moments, unstructured, responsive, shaped as much by Mila's choices as Raphael's restraint. The next lesson came without instruction. They stood close in the quiet of his living space. City lights dimmed, the room hushed. Raphael watched her, not with calculation, but attention. Mila closed the distance first. She lifted her hand, not hesitantly this time, and rested it lightly against his chest. She felt his heart beat beneath her palm, steady and controlled. Raphael inhaled sharply, but he did not move. She waited for him to guide her, to take control, to turn the moment into something defined. He did not. "You choose," he said quietly. So she did. Mila leaned forward, resting her forehead briefly against his shoulder. The contact was gentle, intentional. Hers. Raphael's hand came up slowly, resting at her back, not pulling, not claiming, just present. The silence deepened. The lesson ended not when he decided, but when she stepped back. Later, alone, Mila confronted the truth she could no longer deny. She wanted him, not the protection, not the structure, him. The realization unsettled her far more than fear ever had. Because desire was not something she could negotiate with. It did not respond to discipline. It demanded honesty. Raphael noticed the change immediately. He saw it in the way she met his gaze without flinching, in the way she stood closer without instruction, in the way her attention returned to him even when others spoke. "You're not asking about the debt anymore," he said one evening. Mila met his eyes. "Does that concern you?" she asked. Raphael paused. "Yes," he said honestly. Because desire shifted power, and power, once shifted, could not be reclaimed without consequence. That night, Raphael spoke words he had avoided since the beginning. "I don't need this arrangement anymore," he said. "Not like this." Mila's breath caught. "I can clear the remaining debt," he continued. "End it." The offer was not a test. It was freedom. Mila searched his face, looking for manipulation, leverage, expectation. She found none, only uncertainty, and something that looked dangerously like fear. "For you," he added, "not for me." The truth settled heavy between them. Raphael Moretti, the man who commanded empires, who bent rooms with silence, was afraid of wanting something he could not control. Mila understood then how deeply she had entered his world, and how deeply he had entered hers. She stepped closer. "I know," she said softly. And in those two words, she acknowledged everything he had not said aloud. They stood like that for a long moment, two people balanced on the edge of a choice neither could make for the other. Outside, the city moved. Schemes unfolded. Enemies watched. But inside that quiet space, the war shifted. This was no longer about survival. It was about surrender. Not to each other, but to the truth of what had formed between them. Mila turned away first, not in retreat, but in resolve. She needed time, because choosing him, truly choosing him, meant choosing a future where danger would never fully leave her, where love would be tested not by distance, but by proximity to violence and consequence. Raphael let her go without protest, because he knew the next move had to be hers. And as Mila closed the door behind her that night, her heart steady despite the storm beyond the glass, one certainty anchored her. She was no longer staying because she had to. She was staying because she wanted to, and want, once acknowledged, changed everything. The invitation arrived, sealed in ivory. No threats, no warnings. Just elegant script and impeccable timing. A private evening, limited guests. Neutral ground. The kind of event that existed to prove power without openly displaying it. Raphael read the card once and set it aside. "This is a test," he said. Mila felt it immediately, the tightening air, the subtle shift in rhythm. She had learned to recognize danger not by noise, but by how carefully everything was arranged around it. "Then we don't go," she said. Raphael studied her for a long moment. "We do," he replied. Because refusing would say more than attending ever could. That night, Mila dressed without the practiced calm she had once relied on. The mirror reflected a woman who no longer hid behind control, but carried awareness in her posture. Visibility had changed her. The venue was intimate, too intimate. A private estate overlooking the water, guarded discreetly. The kind of place where secrets felt safe until they weren't. Inside, conversations flowed easily. Laughter masked calculation. Alliances were tested over wine and quiet glances. Mila remained close to Raphael, close enough to signal unity, not possession. Eyes followed them. She noticed things now, a pause in conversation when Raphael turned away. A man who watched her too carefully, a woman who smiled while listening more than speaking. The city, she realized, had found its opening. The moment came without drama. A server brushed past her, slipped something into her hand. A folded note. Mila's pulse spiked, but she did not react. Later, in the privacy of a side room, she unfolded it. A name, a date, a location, and proof. Photographs, transactions, meetings that should not have existed. Someone close to Raphael had been feeding information to his enemies, and they knew exactly how to make it hurt. By involving her, Mila's chest tightened, not with fear, but with clarity. This invitation was not about diplomacy. It was about exposure. She returned to Raphael without hesitation, placed the note in his hand. He read it once. His expression did not change, but something in the room shifted, like pressure before a storm. "They're using you," he said quietly. "No," Mila corrected. "They're using what you feel." The truth landed between them, sharp and undeniable. Her innocence had not protected her. It had marked her. The rest of the evening passed under tension so tight it hummed. Smiles continued. Glasses clinked. But beneath the civility, the war moved closer. When they finally left, security doubled. Routes changed. Silence thickened. Back in the car, Raphael broke it at last. "I should have ended this sooner." Mila turned to him. "No," she said. "You should have trusted me sooner." He looked at her then, not as someone to shield, but as someone to face truth with. The realization was immediate. This was no longer a matter of keeping her safe by distance. The threat existed because she was close, and it would not disappear if she stepped away. That night, Raphael revealed what he had withheld. The traitor was not a rival, it was family. A man who had survived the betrayal that built Raphael's empire. A man who believed Raphael's restraint had made him weak, and Mila was the proof. "They think you're leverage," Raphael said. A clean pressure point. Mila stood quietly, absorbing the weight of it. "What happens now?" she asked. Raphael hesitated, and in that hesitation, Mila understood something critical. For the first time since she had entered his world, Raphael did not have complete control. Not because he was unprepared, but because the choice ahead could not be made without her. "They will force a decision," he said finally. "They always do." Mila walked to the window, city lights reflecting in the glass like fractures. She had entered this world to save her cousin. She had stayed to fulfill obligation. She had grown to want. And now she was being asked to decide who she would become in a war that did not forgive hesitation. Behind her, Raphael spoke with brutal honesty. "I won't ask you to be a shield." Mila turned. "And if I choose to be one?" Raphael's voice was low. "Then nothing will touch you without consequence." The city waited. Enemies calculated. And Mila Caruso, once untouched, once invisible, stood at the center of a game that had finally revealed its rules. Because innocence, once seen, could never be reclaimed. And the next move would define not just her future, but Raphael Moretti's survival. The decision did not come immediately. Raphael Moretti did not react the way men in his position were expected to. There was no retaliation announced, no orders barked into phones, no visible escalation. Instead, he withdrew. Not from Mila, but from the structure he had built around her. Meetings were canceled. Appearances postponed. The carefully measured lessons ceased without explanation. For the first time since Mila had entered his world, the silence felt wrong. 2 days passed. On the third, Raphael asked her to meet him in his office. The city was gray outside the windows, rain washing the streets below like erasure. The room felt different, less guarded, more exposed. Raphael stood when she entered. "I've cleared it," he said. Mila blinked. "The debt," he continued. "All of it. Your cousin is free. No conditions, no stages, no return." The words took a moment to register. Free, no leverage, no obligation, no structure tying her to him. Mila felt the absence immediately, like stepping into open air after living inside walls. Raphael did not step closer. He placed a folder on the desk between them. "Travel documents," he said. "Funds. Security until you're settled. Wherever you choose. He looked at her directly. You can leave today. The offer was complete, clean, uncomplicated. There was no manipulation left in it. Mila's pulse slowed, not with relief, but with weight. This was the choice she had been moving toward since the first night he had said we'll start slow. And now it was here. Without debt, there was no justification to stay. Without danger, there was no excuse. Only desire. And desire, she knew, was the hardest reason to trust. What about you? She asked. Raphael's jaw tightened. I will handle what comes, he said. It was not bravado, it was fact. Mila walked to the window, city blurred by rain. This view had once terrified her. Now it felt familiar, almost honest. She had learned his world, learned its costs, and learned herself within it. Staying would mean accepting a life where safety was conditional, where love invited threat, where peace would always be negotiated, not assumed. Leaving would mean reclaiming quiet, control, distance, the kind of life she had believed made her unbreakable. Behind her, Raphael waited. He did not rush her, did not follow, did not ask. Because for the first time, the outcome was not his to influence. Mila turned back to him. I won't be a liability, she said. Raphael met her gaze steadily. You never were. And I won't stay because I'm afraid to leave. A pause. Good, he said. She took a breath. Then she said the words that changed everything. I'm staying because I want to. Raphael closed his eyes briefly, not in relief but in surrender. Because her choice carried weight. It meant she understood the danger and accepted it anyway. Not as payment, as partnership. He crossed the room then, not to claim, not to confine, but to stand beside her. This ends the structure, he said. No lessons, no stages. Mila nodded. I know. And you're free to walk away at any point. She met his gaze. I know. Outside, the rain eased. The city continued its quiet watch. But inside that room, something fundamental had shifted. What bound them now was not debt, not protection, not obligation. It was choice. And choice, freely made, was the most dangerous commitment of all. Because enemies could exploit leverage, they could not exploit loyalty. And as Mila Caruso stepped fully into Raphael Moretti's world, no longer as collateral but as equal, the war waiting beyond the glass recalculated its odds. Mila Caruso's decision did not remain private for long. In Raphael Moretti's world, silence traveled faster than announcements. Meetings resumed. Invitations returned. Appearances were scheduled, not cautiously, not defensively, but deliberately. Visibility this time was not a test, it was a declaration. At the first event after the debt was cleared, Mila stood at Raphael's side without structure to shield her. No staged lessons. No pretense of transaction, just presence. Those who watched noticed immediately. She no longer stood half a step behind. She did not wait for cues. She spoke when addressed, calm, precise, unflinching. Men who had once viewed her as leverage now recalculated. Women observed her with a mix of curiosity and respect. Because something fundamental had changed. She had stayed when she didn't have to. That kind of loyalty was not purchased. It was chosen. Raphael's enemies moved within days. The message came subtly, a shipment seized, a meeting intercepted, a warning delivered without words. Mila felt it in the way security tightened, in the way Raphael's focus sharpened when he thought she wasn't watching, but he did not pull her back, did not hide her. He let her see. This was the cost of staying. One evening, as they prepared to leave for a dinner too carefully planned to be benign, Raphael finally spoke the truth he had been holding back. They will come for me through you, he said, not because you're weak, because you're visible. Mila met his gaze without hesitation. Then let them see I'm not afraid, she said. Raphael studied her, long, searching. Then he nodded. The dinner unfolded under tension so tight it bordered on violence. Conversation was polite. Smiles were sharp. Everyone in the room understood what was being measured. At one point, a rival made the mistake of addressing Mila directly. You've changed him, the man said lightly. That can be dangerous. Mila did not look to Raphael for guidance. She answered herself. He was always dangerous, she said. I just see him clearly." The room stilled. Raphael did not intervene. He did not need to. Later that night, the first real consequence arrived. An attempt, not successful but deliberate. A message, not an attack. Mila was escorted to safety while Raphael handled the response with swift precision. No spectacle, no escalation beyond necessity. When they reunited, the air between them felt charged, not with fear but with resolve. "This is what staying looks like," Raphael said quietly. Mila nodded. "I know." She did not ask him to stop. She did not ask him to change. She had chosen him knowing exactly what he was. And that knowledge made her dangerous. Because she did not love an illusion. She loved the truth. The city responded. Some stepped back. Others leaned in harder. But one thing became clear. Mila Caruso was no longer leverage. She was alignment. And alignment, once declared, could not be undone without fracture. That night, as they stood together overlooking the city, Raphael finally allowed himself something he had denied since the beginning. He rested his forehead briefly against hers, not claiming, not demanding, just acknowledging. Mila closed her eyes. She had crossed the threshold she could never uncross. And for the first time since she had learned the meaning of untouched, she understood something profound. Being unbroken did not mean remaining intact. It meant choosing what and who you allowed to change you. Outside, the war continued its quiet advance, but inside that still moment, two people stood fully aware of the cost of what they had chosen, and neither stepped away. Redemption did not arrive with grand declarations. There were no speeches, no vows to change spoken into candlelight. For Raphael Moretti, transformation came the only way he understood. Through dismantling what he had built piece by piece. It began quietly. Accounts were closed. Roots rerouted. Alliances reevaluated. The machinery of his empire did not vanish overnight. It slowed. Adjusted. Shed its most violent edges. Every move carried resistance. From men who thrived in chaos. From those who mistook restraint for weakness. Mila watched it happen without illusion. She did not ask Raphael to become someone else. She asked him to become accountable. He did not hide the cost from her. "There will be fallout," he said. "People don't forgive power that chooses to soften." Mila nodded. "Then don't soften," she replied. "Redirect." Raphael studied her then with something like wonder, because she was not asking him to abandon strength. She was asking him to redefine it. The first consequence came swiftly. A longtime ally refused to adapt, tried to undermine the transition, tried to provoke the old response. Raphael ended the association decisively, not violently, but publicly. A statement, not a warning. The city took note. This was not retreat. It was evolution. Mila became his constant, not as ornament, not as shield, but as anchor. She attended meetings not to influence decisions directly, but to witness them. To remind Raphael what accountability looked like when someone you respected was watching. And he respected her, more than anyone else. Time passed, not marked by dates, but by absence of chaos. The nights grew quieter. The tension in Raphael's shoulders eased gradually, like a man unlearning a language he had spoken too long. Enemies tested less frequently. Those who remained adjusted. The city recalibrated. One evening, Raphael stood with Mila overlooking the same skyline that had once symbolized threat. Now, it felt like possibility. "I don't know who I am without the constant war," he admitted. Mila answered without hesitation. "Then let yourself learn." He turned to her. "And if I fail?" Mila met his gaze steadily. "Then you try again." There was no romance in the statement, only truth. That night, Raphael made a choice that solidified everything. He walked away from a deal that would have guaranteed dominance, but required brutality. It cost him power, it cost him money. And it earned him something else entirely, peace, not complete, not perfect, but real. The city reacted in whispers. Some called it weakness. Others called it strategy. Those who understood power recognized it as something rarer. Control without cruelty. Mila felt the shift most clearly in herself. She slept without listening for threats, played her violin again, not as discipline, but expression. The music filled spaces once dominated by silence and vigilance. Raphael listened from doorways, never interrupting, learning. This was not redemption born of love alone, it was redemption sustained by choice. Repeated daily, deliberately, and when setbacks came, as they always did, Raphael faced them without reverting. Because Mila was no longer just someone he protected. She was someone he did not want to disappoint. That changed everything. The city still remembered his name, feared it in some corners. But now it also respected it differently. And as the world adjusted to a man who refused to be what it expected, one truth became undeniable. Raphael Moretti was not being redeemed by love. He was being reshaped by responsibility. And Mila Caruso, once untouched, once invisible, stood beside him not as proof of his change, but as the reason it endured. The city did not notice the moment everything finally settled. There was no announcement, no headline, no visible line between the man Raphael Moretti had been and the one he had chosen to become. But Mila Caruso felt it. It arrived quietly, like the easing of a long-held breath. Time moved forward not in dramatic leaps, but in ordinary days. Mornings without urgency. Evenings without surveillance reports whispered through doors. The war that once pressed against every moment had not vanished, but it had retreated, pushed back by consistency rather than force. Raphael's world had narrowed, not in power but in purpose. What remained was deliberate, legitimate, difficult. He faced resistance from men who preferred fear to stability, but he did not bend. He absorbed losses without reverting. He chose restraint even when violence would have been easier. And Mila stayed, not as sacrifice, not as shield, but as witness. She moved through her days with a steadiness she had never known, not because danger was gone, but because fear no longer defined her decisions. She played her violin again, this time in the open living space, sunlight spilling across polished floors. The music was no longer precise for the sake of control. It was expressive, alive. Raphael listened from nearby, never interrupting. He had learned that some moments were not meant to be directed. One evening, as the city glowed beneath the windows in the same familiar pattern it always had, Raphael spoke words he had never planned. "I don't want to protect you anymore," he said quietly. Mila turned, surprised, not alarmed. "I want to build with you." The distinction mattered. Protection implied danger would always lead. Building implied choice. She did not answer immediately. She walked to him instead, took his hand, not tentatively, not as a lesson, not as a test, simply as truth. The commitment that followed was not grand, no audience, no spectacle. Just a vow spoken in quiet certainty. Two people acknowledging the life they were choosing, fully aware of what it required. Mila did not promise to make him better. Raphael did not promise to become harmless. They promised honesty, accountability, presence, and that was enough. Years passed, not without challenge, but with direction. Raphael's influence reshaped itself into legitimacy. Foundations replaced fronts, protection became provision, power transformed into responsibility. People whispered less about his past and more about what he had built. Mila's life expanded. She taught again, performed. Used her discipline not as armor but as mastery. She no longer believed untouched meant unbroken. She knew better now because she had allowed herself to be changed and had not disappeared because of it. One afternoon, standing in the same city she had once feared, Mila reflected on the girl she had been. The girl who believed distance was safety. The girl who believed control was strength. She smiled softly. She had learned that strength could also be trust, that safety could come from being chosen and choosing back, that being touched did not mean being owned, it meant being seen. Raphael joined her, resting his hand at her back, not claiming, not guarding, just present. The city moved on below them, unaware of the quiet legacy unfolding above it, and Mila Caruso, once untouched, once invisible, understood the final truth of her journey. She had not lost herself by stepping into Raphael Moretti's world. She had found herself by deciding who she would be inside it. The risk had been real, the danger undeniable, but the life she had chosen was worth it. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support helps me bring you even more emotional, heartwarming stories filled with love, tension, and unforgettable moments. Stay tuned. More beautiful stories are on the way.